Hello and welcome.
Oh,
Welcome to the Health Spot,
yeah.
where we are combining leadership and health. And my name is Kiki. I am an executive leadership coach. I am the owner of Thrive Mind Collaborative. I help high achieving leaders gain or regain confidence and clarity so they can take intentional action to achieve their goals and experience more joy and fulfillment in their lives, both professional and personal. And I'm here today with the lovely Ariel. Do you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure. Ariel here. And I'm a health coach, and I help people establish lifestyle change through fitness and nutrition. And they too also live happier, healthier lives.
Yeah,
So there you have it.
I love it. All right. Well, before we get started, I'd love to quickly share our wins from this week. And if you're here with us today, feel free to share wins that we can help you celebrate in the chat as well. Um, Ariel, do you have a win or do you want me to go first?
I have a couple.
Ooh, please do share.
Well, I'll just do one because one of them involves client wins. So I'll just do mine. I got a pedicure this morning, and it was a last minute decision. And it tied into our topic from last week of talking about time. And I looked at my toes and I was just like, how am I going to fit in a pedicure this weekend? Like thinking about that just seemed very overwhelming. Like, oh, I have to arrange, my husband to take the kid. And I went down that road, and then I was like, when can I fit it in? And I was like, okay, I just dropped him off. What is the closest salon that opens at like 9? And I found one. I walked in and I got a pedicure because it doesn't take long. And also I was like, okay, well, I can do some work emails too if I need to and just, do that. So
Amazing. I love it. I love it.
yes, toes.
You also can't reach your toes very well. I mean, you can because you're mobile, but you have something that you recently announced, right?
Oh yeah.
That hinders you from kind of painting your toenails or bending over and reaching your feet for a long period of time. Do you want to share that with anyone that's here today?
You can share.
Ariel is pregnant. Yay! Which is, I feel like the second time around, at least for me, I felt bigger sooner. I felt like things just happened more quickly the second time around. And finding time, prioritizing time to take care of yourself when you're growing a human and your body is going through so much. I think it's so incredibly important. And how do you feel? Like how can you kind of share how that made you feel after getting the pedicure? Did you like come into work feeling a different way than you did say yesterday?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the problem is I cannot reach my toes, and I'm a former dancer and I'm very flexible. And so I can touch my toes. And I'm just like frustrated that like I'm like, oh, this hurts. So the fact that I can't touch my toes right now is really annoying and
Yeah.
exasperating. And so the only way, but it's like one of those little things that just makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
And like I don't really do my nails anymore, at least just not at this moment in time. But like my toes, I'd like want them. I'm in LA and I'm in flip-flops all the time. And I don't know. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel really good about it. I'm like, I don't feel guilty in any way. I don't feel like, oh, I should have been doing X, Y, and Z. No, I was like, no, it's like 40 minutes,
Yeah. Amazing.
And then overall, I feel good. I feel as good as I possibly can at 6.5 months, I think I am. Something like that.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
It is crazy. It goes by so much faster, I feel like the second time around. I can't believe you're that far along already.
It doesn't. It's really funny. People are like, oh my God, it's going by so fast. I'm like, for you.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
But yes, in retrospect, it does go by faster because you're taking care of so many other things. You don't have much energy or time to think about that.
Yeah.
You know.
Totally. Oh, well, I'm so glad you've motivated me. I need to go I need to go get a pedicure. Well, that's a weird noise.
Yeah, what is that?
I don't know. That was bizarre.
That
Technical
was
issue.
bizarre. Was it aliens
It might have been aliens
chiming in?
chiming in. Let's see. So my win this week is I was sick last week and I'm still kind of recovering from feeling a little bit sick and lower energy. And two things. I think one, I gave myself the space over the weekend and even into this week to kind of check in with myself and um, feel however it is that I'm feeling and not get into the I should be or I should, be doing all of these other things, but really kind of tending to my own health. Um, what that's looked like is I've been able to kind of give myself the rest I think that I've needed. Um, and I've really been focused on putting good food into my body, which has been great. And I was able to do a really awesome workout this week with you, which was awesome. And it felt really good to get back into it because last week was just not a workout week. I was tending to my health, and that was kind of the focus was rest. And so getting back into it this week was such a win. It felt so good. And I missed it. I missed that feeling of being sore the next day. I missed the feeling of being strong. Um, so I think that was my main win this week was just kind of realizing that getting back into it, it's a different mindset, right? You and I have talked about this, but my previous mindset was if I had an off week, getting back into everything was like, oh, I got to get back into it. And now I'm like, ooh, I get to get back into it. And that was a really great mindset shift.
Good.
Yeah, I also wanted to share, I read this actually this morning. And it goes in line with sharing our wins, talking about our wins, acknowledging our wins. When we take the time to acknowledge what is going well, there might be other things that are happening that are hard, that are challenging. But when we take the time to acknowledge the wins, acknowledge those things that are going well, it's part of the process of habit change. And it releases dopamine, which increases motivation, which we talked about a few weeks ago. This concept that you don't need motivation to take action. And when you take action, motivation comes. And
Yep.
part of that is you take an action and you see the win, you feel the win, whatever that is, right? Doing a workout and feeling strong or feeling accomplished. When you take the time to acknowledge it, even better if you can express it. So sharing it with someone else, sharing it with your community, express it through writing. Um, it increases your dopamine output, which then increases your motivation, which then allows you to take more action in that vein, whatever it is that you're focused on, whether it's working out, whether it's showing up. I talked with someone the other day about how they're always nervous when they show up for a speaking engagement and how they just don't know how to get out of that rut of always feeling nervous. And it was like,
Mhm.
we kind of talked about, okay, what are the wins? What were the moments where you were able to get into the conversation and no longer feel nervous? What was the win? And
Yeah.
expressing those wins. And it was like, oh, I am making these shifts. I am making these changes. And I had checked in with her. She's not actually a client, but she's a peer. And we check in every so often. And she was like, I have an update for you. She was like, I have now shifted to where when I start something, I'm excited. And there's kind of some excitement nerves, but it's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different experience
Yeah.
than going into it kind of frozen in anxiety, frozen in like, oh God, I can't do this. And I use
Mhm.
the quote all the time,
Yeah.
fear, anxiety, it's excitement without the breath. And it really is when you think about that fear or that anxiety, you're holding your breath, you might be clenching in some way. And so allowing yourself to breathe, checking in with yourself, and making that shift from anxiety to excitement allows you to then take action, which increases that motivation, increases your wins, increases the dopamine, which it's just this like positive reinforcing cycle, which I think leads in really well to what we were going to talk about today, which
Yeah.
is and kind of these not specific different types of stress. There's acute stress, there's chronic stress, there's all these environmental stress, there's all these different types of stress. But we're going to talk about stress in kind of a different way today. We're going to talk a little bit about stress as it pertains to anxiety. And it's kind of driven by anxiety, it's driven by, fear potentially, versus the stress that comes up with something exciting, something that you're doing that is maybe meaningful for you, something that you're doing that will make a difference, something that you're doing that maybe you've never done before, but it's a challenge and you're excited by it. And how, when you have that type of stress, it's a lot easier to take action. It's a lot easier to use the momentum to your own benefit. Whereas when you're stressed out and it's caused by anxiety, there's like that stress response of like fight, flight, freeze pops in, and it's like, oh God, I just want to get out of this. But it's really hard to take action.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and kind of how this topic came about, and dig us in a little bit more to these two different types of stress, and what drives them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the motivating factor behind this topic for me was, well, one, I'm going through some personal things with my family, but then also digesting or absorbing my clients' stress. And, you feel someone's stress. You can feel it. It's an energy. And I literally had an epiphany. I think it was when I was with a client, and she was sharing with me how stressed out she was about, what was going on in her life, and house being remodeled and things like that. And then some of the negative things that were stressing her out. And I helped her identify, well, I think one of the things I said was, wow, a house remodel, how exciting. And she kind of like laughed at me. And I was like, listen, there's a lot of stress that goes into that. I understand. But at the end of the day, it's exciting because you're getting the thing you want. Like, it's going to happen in the end. Sure, there will be stressful moments getting there, but like, how exciting that you get to do that. And yeah, there's all these moving parts, and it's going to take X, Y, and Z, and it's going to take this long, and you have to shuffle the kids around, and all of that stuff goes along with it. But when you look at it in terms of like a positive stressor, I don't know, it can just change your approach to the way you handle the actions that have to come after that. Whereas someone who is, really bogged down by, just other stressors in life, family issues, just even personal issues. Obviously, in my line of work, I deal with a lot of stress eating. And so when I get down to the bottom of that, it's, we figure out what that negative stressor is and how we can kind of turn that into a positive. And one of the things I do is like, well, what if like you are starting to feel better? And what if you do try this, and you try this new snack, or you eat breakfast even though you normally don't eat breakfast? Like, maybe even though work stress will be there, what will shift for you? And I guide people in helping them figure that out. But anyway, it became very clear to me that there are these two types of stress. And if you can decipher between the two, you can then figure out what your next step is. And it helps break down the overwhelm, which is essentially my entire point. So
Yes.
it's very long-winded.
No, I love that. I think it's interesting. I was thinking about this topic and thinking about, what we've talked about in regards to stress. And I think what you're talking about here is, and what I've experienced even in working with you, is the reframe is so important. That perspective is so important. We can, if we are in the midst of overwhelming anxiety driven stress, noticing it first off, I think is sometimes the hardest thing to do. I think it's really easy to feel something challenging, whether it's a challenging emotion or experience. And from a protection standpoint, we're like, and we don't want to deal with that, right? And so we kind of push it off. And I know that for a long time, I was carrying anxiety driven stress, and I wasn't really aware of it, but it was impacting my behavior. It was impacting how
Mm,
I showed up
well said.
in my role as a leader. So, and when I say leader, I mean that in terms of, you know, the Zoom room, the boardroom, and the family room, right? Like wherever
Mhm.
I show up as, a leader, I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to show up. My behavior wasn't in alignment with my intentions. And a lot of it stemmed from the fact that I wasn't aware of, or maybe I was aware of the stress, but I didn't want to deal with it. And I wasn't taking time to understand it or get curious about it. And the more we've talked about stress, I've been able to identify those different types of stress. And once I can identify it, I have tools now to be able to shift that stress. So if I'm stressed from an anxiety standpoint, the first thing for me is what is within my control?
Right.
Whether it's my mindset, my perspective, is there another way that I could potentially look at this? Am I making an assumption based off of an internal belief that may not actually be true? And maybe it's my body trying to protect myself against stress, but having some compassion for myself, noticing that stress, noticing where it's stemming from, and then asking, what do I have control over? Because I have control over my perspective or my mindset and shifting that. I loved what you said about being able to reframe. Oftentimes, when we're super stressed out from an anxiety standpoint, we're thinking about what's in front of us, what's swirling around us, all the things that have to happen, and you're in the weeds, right? It's like you look in all the directions and all you see are weeds. You're like in the middle of a corn maze, and you're like, I don't know which way is up and down.
It's very real.
It's very real. And finding ways to be able to elevate yourself above the weeds, to be able to see where that end point is or that outcome that you're looking for, something that will help get you excited about the actions that you have to take that will get you to that place. And even reframing, like you said, what if instead of you feeling this way, what if by eating that meal at breakfast time or integrating the workouts, in this way or whatever it is, what if you could shift, and what if this could be your outcome?
Mhm.
As you kind of get to that thing, that motivating factor, oftentimes you can shift the stress, and you're also looking at what you can control. You can shift the stress, and all of a sudden you have in front of you these steps. And it's like, all right, from a remodel perspective, what's my next step? What's the next thing that I have under my control? I can't control whether or not my plans get approved by the city or by the county,
Right.
but I can do everything in my power to get the right people on the plan so that they can
Yeah.
do the best possible job. And then I can, send it off. So,
Yeah.
and like having that framework of what is this all for and where do I want to go? What do I want to feel? What is the experience I'm trying to cultivate for myself? That can oftentimes motivate us to gain some excitement around, or shift the anxiety stress into more excitement stress so that we can take action. We can acknowledge the wins,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that helps us reach that goal or that outcome that we're looking for, get through that stress.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's see. Well, we talked about time last week, but and that's one of the most popular things that I hear people struggle with. But the other two things I hear the most out of anyone's mouth when you say, "Hey, how are you doing?" It's usually, "Oh, I'm good. I'm stressed out," or "I'm busy." Like those are like the two things that like come into my mind of the most popular
Yeah. Overwhelm.
sense.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
overwhelm. I think that's actually really interesting too. We did not plan on talking about this, but I'm going to bring it in.
Okay.
This concept of overwhelm,
Yeah.
I think it's really easy sometimes. We live in a very fast-paced world with technology, with all of the things that we're doing, with work, with life, with kids especially. It is fast-paced. And we don't oftentimes give ourselves the space to be self-aware enough to understand what our experience is in the moment.
Yeah.
And overwhelm is a dear friend of mine.
Mm.
Um,
Mine too.
yes. And for a long time, overwhelm was scary to me. It was a state where I knew it was going to be hard for me to take action because everything was kind of swirly and I'm overwhelmed by all of the things that are in front of me. And I think part of that for me, if I don't, I have, so brain dumping is a practical tool that you can utilize. That's something that I utilize when I'm overwhelmed. I can notice it and I can implement a tool that then helps me remove the overwhelm so it doesn't turn into this like underlying stress that then impacts my behavior and impacts how
Mhm.
I show up. It's the ability to kind of notice it and then pause and figure out what tool you need to be able to move forward. And so like brain dumping for instance for me is a great tool for me to utilize when I'm in that freeze state and I'm super overwhelmed. I don't know which direction to go first. Getting all of that information out onto a page and then using a prioritization matrix to prioritize it.
You
And
said matrix, and that overwhelmed me.
Yeah, sorry. So prioritization matrix can be really simple. It literally can just be these are the things that I need to get done today or this week, right?
Right.
And these are the things that I can get done in the next couple of weeks. And these are the things that are longer term that don't need to get done right now, but I don't want to forget about them. And I don't want them like taking up my brain space and causing overwhelm. And so the concept of brain dumping is getting all of it out of your brain and onto a page. But then in order to take action, if I look at a long list of to-dos and it's 25 things, that's not really helping with my overwhelm. I got it out of my brain, but now I'm still like, what do I do with this information? So when you can prioritize it with whatever way works for you, do this now, do this later, do this at some point,
Yeah.
right? You can kind of create your own matrix for what that looks like. You can also do it in a different way where you categorize it. So it's a categorization matrix where it's like, this is my work priorities. These are my home priorities. These are my self priorities. And then, prioritizing those smaller lists is a lot easier than taking this massive list of 25 things and trying to prioritize it.
Right.
Yeah. What are some other ways, like for you, we talked a little bit about reframing the situation and kind of noticing what you're focused on. Um, but how, when you're in that state of overwhelm or stress and you notice it within yourself, what are some of the like tangible tactical tools that you can implement that help you kind of shift, whether it's shifting your perspective or shifting your experience so that you can take action versus sitting in it
Well,
and having
that's a good
consequences?
question. I do want to throw out the question to people that are here and who are chiming in. Like, if you, like, what do you guys do in times of stress? Like, are you able to identify what kind of stress you're under? Definitely let us know in the chat, because we want to hear how you deal with stress too. So,
Yeah.
I'm just writing that in the chat here. But um, to answer your question, first of all the things that you were saying, I agree with, and I think are really wonderful. But it also highlights how different we are, and I think that's important to recognize too, because
Mhm.
you said matrix, and I was overwhelmed by that, and I loved how you broke it down. That definitely helped me, and that's great in theory. I don't think I do that. I think I break it down even further. And one of the ways I've been taught how to kind of handle those stressful, overwhelming moments is to, I guess it's labeled essentialism, and is to write down the top 3 essentials. So I have to just break it down into like very simple. Like I have a Post-it note because there's little space on the Post-it note. So I
Yeah.
can't write that many things. So it's literally like 3 things are written down. And if I can check those off, I'm like, oh, I did something today. Oh, right. Um, so I don't know. I'm getting better at that. I'm still working on it though.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've talked about this before. I thrive when there is um, a process to follow or some sort of model or structure that I can utilize.
Mm-hmm.
It it gives me a sense of control, which alleviates that anxiety driven stress.
Yeah,
This is like an epiphany moment. I said in our LinkedIn post that we might share like random epiphanies as we have
I
them.
like it.
But this is totally an epiphany moment for me. I think that's why a model or a matrix or a structure of some sort is so helpful for me is I'm able to take the overwhelm and I'm able to contain it and I'm able to process it with a process. And that's really helpful. And I agree. I actually would say that once I'm able to get it all out of my brain and into another place where it's like it's there, I don't have to keep it in my brain anymore, then I'm able to take that next step that you were talking about where you take a post-it and it's like, okay, and I sometimes will, if I'm really overwhelmed, it's like, what is the one thing that I need to do today?
Yeah.
What is the one thing? And then once I do that one thing, it's like, okay, cool. What's another thing I can do? And again, as you accomplish, as you take action, your motivation increases, your ability to take more action increases, and you can kind of move yourself through that experience.
Yeah. How does that affect your leaders who you work with when you do that and implement that?
The brain dump thing was a really helpful tool for one of my more recent clients. And I think she and I are very similar in the sense that she keeps a lot in her brain. And the way that it impacts her when she shows up is she's not super clear. So when she's communicating with her team and she's in a state of overwhelm or stress, there's so much that's in her brain that she jumps from this topic to this topic to this topic, back to this topic, back over to this topic. You've seen me do this. I've done this with you before when I'm in a state of overwhelm. And it's a really good indication for me. If I'm bouncing around like that and I'm doing it in kind of a manic way, there's too much in my brain. I'm not able to actually be present and I'm not able to communicate effectively. And then the
Mm,
impact of that, what her team was experiencing was there was misalignment. And so it was like, I'm telling my team to do these things, but they're not doing them. How do you deal
mm,
with your team? And now she's angry. Now she's frustrated because she's like, I'm communicating to my team what they need to do and they're not doing it.
mm,
As we dug in and we explored a little bit, it was like, wow, like maybe my communication wasn't actually as clear as it could have been.
mm.
How do I prep myself before I have the communication with the team? How do I, so her process was brain dump it all out, get all of those things out, personal, professional, all those things, put them all on a document somewhere, whether it's online or you're writing it down, put it somewhere outside of your brain. Then, and this isn't even from like a prioritization standpoint, she just needs to get it all out. And then her prioritization process when she's communicating with her team is what are the top 3 things that I need to communicate to the team? And how do I ensure understanding and agreement and alignment in that conversation? And that becomes her focus rather than the conversation being kind of a brain dump, really, was what she was doing. She was brain dumping with her team, which I think she knew she needed to do. But the result was she wasn't having aligned communication. She wasn't getting the results that she wanted to get out of her team. And she was walking away frustrated with her team. And to be quite honest, her team was walking away frustrated with her. And so once she was able to kind of shift, she started using this brain dump doc. And literally, you don't need a doc. You don't need like a special, I like frameworks. So I like to have a doc that says brain at the top, and I know it's my brain dump doc and I can focus on it. You can get out a piece of paper and just write brain dump on the very top of it. You can do it however works for you. but getting it out of her brain and then being able to get really clear on what are the most important things that I need to convey. Then she had time in the session to ensure alignment, ensure understanding, and talk about next steps to make sure that everyone kind of understood what she was saying and how to apply it.
Mm, that's really interesting
Yeah.
that all translated
Hmm.
from that moment.
Yeah. And even the modeling, right? Like her ability to model, she said that one of the shifts that she mentioned was that she noticed her team is less, I keep using this word manic, but basically like rushing to get things done and not really doing things in a well thought out way, but rather just trying to cross off all the to dos. They were following her energy. They were following her approach. They were following kind of her manicness of going, I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and I got to do this. And she was keeping it all in her brain. And the reason she was moving very quickly from thing to thing was because number one, she was stressed out. Number two, she had so much in her brain and she wasn't actually getting things
Yeah.
done well. It was just a matter of like, okay, I have 25 million tabs in my brain open. How can I like finish this so I can click out of that tab and finish this so I can click out of that tab? But the result wasn't where she wanted it to
Yeah.
be. And so her team was she was modeling that for her team. Her team was following that.
Yeah.
The same way that, with your kids, it's like, oh my gosh, I saw this the other day and I was like, it resonated so deeply. You know how all kids do this, where they're like, mom, 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 and you're like in the middle of a conversation.
Yes.
Ha, like, let me just finish. And then you think about how when you need to get your kids' attention, and say your kid is, whether they're reading a book or they're watching a show, oftentimes I'm in the kitchen, I'm making dinner, and I'm like, all right, hey boys, it's time to turn off your show, or it's time to, finish what you're doing so we can do this. I'm not walking over to them and putting my hand on their shoulder and waiting for eye contact and then saying, hey, it's going to be time for dinner, right? Modeling, hey boys, hey boys, hey boys. And then when they're not doing
Yeah.
it, when they're
Then you
invested
get
in whatever they're doing,
stuff.
yeah. And so shifting that small thing, now it's like I try my best to take the time to put down the spatula and walk over to them and get their attention in the way that I would want them to get my attention. And now my kids are coming up to me. I'll be in the middle of a conversation. And instead of yelling mom from the other room, or instead of saying it over and over and over, they'll come over and they'll put their hand on me and I put my hand on theirs. And it's like a recognition. I see you. I finish what I'm saying. And then every once in a while, they're like, mom, but it's not the same. And so how people show up and how you model, whether that's in a leadership role for your team or in a leadership role as a parent, um, this type of stress, these different types of stress can really impact what you're modeling. And that really is what people are going to take away. People take away how you make them feel and not necessarily what you say. And so how can you adjust that for yourself so that you're modeling in a way that your team can then do their best work as well?
Yeah. I think also too from all of that, um, you know, it's important to recognize when we're in the overwhelmed, stressed state, there's a feeling of lack of control. And I think what we're essentially getting at is that once you're able to identify where you're at, you realize what you have control over. And I think that's a really important point, is that you can take back control in some way, shape, or form. And so
Yeah.
it's important to know that, like, we all have the capability of doing that.
Yeah.
Whether it's, leading a team, or whether it's in, regarding someone's own health, that there is control. You just have to you have to find it. You have to find where it is and with the specific things that you actually have control over. I think that's a
Yeah.
really important point.
I want to share real quick. Miriam shared in the chat some of the ways that she deals with stress.
Mm,
And I just love these. And I just wanted to touch on the point that when you're talking with family and friends, there's a release, right? Like similar to a brain dump, we're kind of talking about like, oh, at work, like how can you, and I'm sitting in an 8 by 10 office shed by myself in my backyard.
mhm.
So my my friends and family aren't right here. But it's the same sort of concept. You're getting out of your head, out of your body, this kind of stress. You're expressing it to someone else, which allows you to kind of release it. Same thing with meditation or even with music. Singing is a really great way for me. I love to like belt out a song and I can feel some sort of challenging emotion, whether it's stress or anxiety or something else. And I can listen to a song, I can belt out that song and there's a release of some sort. Chocolate. I love the concept of chocolate. Like being really present in a specific moment with something that you love so much, like taking a piece of dark chocolate and savoring it, it can help you kind of release all of this stress. You're in the present moment. You're coming back to the present moment. It gives you that sense of regained control. So then you can take action. Um, and I love that. I FaceTime with my sister when I'm really stressed out. And it's such a good way. By the end of the call, I always end up in the call and I'm like, oh my God, I have all these things and I'm brain dumping,
Yeah.
right? And by the end of it, I'm like, oh God, I feel so much better. And then it's like, oh, and I'm very clear. I gain that clarity as well on what the next step is.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's really great.
How, Miriam, if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, how, and Ariel too with dance, like how does that impact, what shift do you notice, right? So whether you're utilizing meditation or dance or singing or listening to music or talking to friends or a brain dump doc, what's the shift that you experience in those moments? How can you go from that state of feeling overwhelmed or anxious driven stress? How can you shift that? And what does that look like in that process for you?
Well, for me, physical movement has always been a form of stress relief. It's how I express emotion, whether that be happiness, anger, or sadness. Um, I can always revert to movement. Um, and, I think growing up at times to my detriment where I would drive myself way too hard. But that's another topic entirely. Um, yeah, I mean, that's like one of the things I kind of miss right now is my biggest stress reliever. I'm not really able to do to the desired degree of what that is for me. So for me, like I take dance class still to this day. Like I find either a jazz or a hip hop or something. And before I got pregnant, I had started getting back into taking class again. And it was just such a release of like stress. And it's my comfort, it's what I use to soothe myself. And like now I'm just going through a phase where I'm not really able to do that right now. And plus I got injured and like, there's just so many things, but I still find ways to get it in. And like my son loves music and every night, apparently he wants to put on a couple of his favorite songs and he's like, it's dance party time. I'm like, okay, great.
Okay. He's definitely your son.
Yes. And I'm like, oh, those are good moves. And he starts teaching me his moves. And I said, okay, well, this is good for now. Like this I can handle.
Yep.
And yeah, just to have a moment like that, I think is really great.
Yeah. I love that. And I feel like my kids, whenever they're showing me their dance moves, there's definitely some of them where I'm like, I'm not doing that. I can't, I'm not going to put my body in that position.
Yeah.
But there's also really fun, whether it's like balancing on one leg and trying to hop, and your arms have to be in a certain position. And it's funny and also laughter. I mean, let's be honest, laughter dissipates stress like
Oh,
nobody's
yeah.
business. Really true, true laughter. And it's like that moment. You're listening to music, you're trying to balance on one leg and hop and,
Neat.
I
Is
don't
that
know.
how you felt in our workout this week?
Oh gosh, in our workout this
Like, lift
week,
your leg up higher. No, keep your arms straight. No.
oh man, in our workout this week, I actually, to be honest, I think in many ways there were some there was like a mix of going into the workout that it was excited stress.
Okay, good.
I was like, oh, I'm implementing this workout and I haven't done workouts in a couple, well, in a week, because I was sick. And as we got into it and as it got hard and you were really pushing me in certain moments and it was like straighten your leg. And I was like, lady, I can't, like, I can't, it won't go any straighter. But I think after the fact, once I was done with the workout, we laughed about it. I shared that with you and we laughed about it. There was no like lingering stress from the workout. It was very much this accomplishment win,
Yeah.
attitude, which then motivated me to continue working out this week, even though last week I hadn't worked out and I was kind of out of my routine. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how even just focusing, I think that's the other thing. In that moment when we were doing that workout, the only thing I was focused on was trying to get into these positions or do these movements in the right way. So, we did a movement with our arms and I kept kind of like pulling my shoulders up because my arms were so tired. And so my body was doing it. I had kind of poor form and you were reminding
Yeah.
me of the form that I needed to have. At no point in that workout was I thinking about the talk I have to give on Friday or the any of the other stressful things. We're leaving to go on a trip to Alaska this weekend, which is another big win. Hopefully we have internet. We can figure that out so that we
Yeah.
can have a LinkedIn Live next week. But I think that's the other thing. And with working out in general, movement in general, for me, the type of movement that helps me release stress is the type of movement that requires my focus. Whether it's because, like with yoga, it's very much like I'm in these very specific positions and I'm trying to sync my breath with the movements and I'm trying to kind of focus on the in between, like you're moving from one position to another position. How are you doing that and how are you doing with it with intention? There's no room for anything else in my brain, and so automatically it kind of is released and I feel better when I then approach everything. It's not like it all zooms back in. Whereas if I go for a walk and it's not super, I'm not like walking up a massive hill, I'm not really pushing myself. For me, it's not a release. I might feel a little bit better. I might feel like my brain is a little bit more clear, a little bit less
Yeah.
foggy, maybe a little bit less stressed, but it's not as much of a release for me. Now, if I was doing a walk and I was integrating some sprints in there, totally.
Yeah.
I don't, when I'm sprinting, I'm like, don't fall, don't fall on the asphalt. Um, and I think it's those types of activities. Same thing with meditation. It's this practice of like removing everything from your brain and being so incredibly present, whether it's like a five senses meditation. What do you smell? What can you feel? What do you see? You're releasing everything else out of your brain and really focusing in on these minute details of the present moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what helps you kind of release the stress. And oftentimes you can come back to something that, 30 minutes before you were so stressed out about and didn't know what action to take. And then you come back and you're like, oh, I'm going to take this action and then I'm going to do this. Okay, great. And you get back into kind of that positive
Clarity.
cycle.
Getting
Yeah.
clarity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Art is another big
Oh,
one
yeah.
for me. Being
Totally.
creative, painting, even if it's not
I think
for
I think the
results.
takeaway from that and all this is distracting your mind in another way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Removing your I'm writing that down because I think it's
Yes.
good.
Do it.
Distracting your mind.
Yes. In a different with something different. And I think oftentimes when I'm in that place of stress and overwhelm and kind of my freeze stress response is showing up, I think it's also an indication for me that maybe I haven't taken that space. Maybe I haven't gotten movement in for the past couple of days. Maybe I haven't actually connected with my friends and family in however much time. Maybe I haven't gone and gotten a pedicure and taken some time to just relax and have some self-care. And so I think, like what you said before, it's not one size fits all, it's one size fits one. And so understanding how to customize your own process and noticing if we all feel stress. Like that's
Yeah.
inevitable in life. We're all going to feel stress at some point. We're all going to feel overwhelmed. But seeing it as an indication that your being, whether it's your body, your brain, you need something, and finding that thing that you can give yourself that then allows you to focus on something else, let go of the things that are stressful and come back to it, right? It's the
Yeah.
same concept. That's happened so many times to me where I'm sitting and it's like total writer's block, or and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this challenge in front of me, and then I'll go and do something and I come back and I'm like, oh, I've gained so much clarity and now I know exactly which action I'm going to take next.
Well, that is one of the things I prescribe for people when they are working all day and not eating and not doing any of those things. It's
Hmm.
like set the timer, go for a walk, and how
Yep.
much clearer do you feel when you come back? You
Hmm.
know?
Your breath is different. Oh, your breath, my breath is different as well. When I take those micro moments,
Mhm.
for me, it's all about habit stacking, or like, so when I inevitably have to go pee throughout my day, it's something that we all have to do, right? Um, I had a hard
Yes.
time integrating food. I had a hard time integrating things within the workday because I'd get so hyper focused on work and I would disregard or ignore any sort of signs within my body that I needed food, or I needed movement, or I needed a moment of silence, or I needed to dance my heart out to a song. I was ignoring all of those cues. And so for me now, there's still days where that happens, but the point at which I notice it is when I go in to go to the bathroom,
Mm.
because there's always this moment where I'm going pee and I'm like, okay, check in.
Yeah.
How am I, like what's going on? What is my experience right now? What do I need? And that's often the time in the bathroom is when I'm like, oh, you know what I need? I need to call a family member, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And then listening to that and compassionately kind of accepting that in. And it's been such a better process for me than, um, the timer thing is helpful for me now, but I think previously it was just another thing I could ignore.
Mhm.
Um, you can't ignore having to go pee, like
No.
you
You can for
can
so long, but then
for so long. Yeah. And so that's a good trick for me as
yeah.
well, is like taking in with those types of, or like getting a glass of water, right? Like I'm a water fiend. And so I sip on my water all day. And when I can sip on my water and feel the cold sensation going down my throat, it's like a moment of, oh, let's just like have a little mini check-in. Oh yeah, I'm doing good. These are the next things I gotta do. Fantastic. Or I'm not doing so great. Like I'm gonna go step outside for a minute, or go get my movement in or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well,
I do. Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
no, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say, I do want to share that we are taking applications
Oh, yeah.
for guest speakers on the show. We want to start bringing in experts in the wellness space, in the leadership space, in the health space, to come in and talk about their expertise. We want to bring more expertise into this space that's different from ours
Mhm.
as well. So if you're interested in becoming a guest on this show, I'm going to share a link in the chat. Um, we have our application form ready to go, and we would absolutely love to host you.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and link that in the chat, and feel free to jump into that form and apply if you'd like to be on our show.
Yeah. We'd love to have you and chit chat.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe we should bring in a game to play during this hour.
Yes.
If you have any
I like,
ideas, folks, of games you'd like to play, not like a long game, just something cute and fun,
yeah.
lighthearted. I'm terrible at
Absolutely.
coming up with that kind of stuff, so I'm gonna ask Kiki and I'm gonna ask you all.
I love it. I love the idea of bringing in, I think one it's kind of a game. One thing that can be really fun is, looking at the different, like, for example, if we were to use this same topic and understanding how you identify and deal with stress. And the game itself is basically I did this the other day for a corporate team and we were looking at ways of working. So it was, on one side it was I'm a big picture thinker. On the other side it was I'm a detail oriented
Yeah,
thinker. And seeing the differences in the group was a really, I think for a lot of people, they were number one, there were some folks that were like, I've never really thought about this. And I'm learning that actually I am a big picture thinker. And whoa, like I didn't really realize that. And what does that mean? But you're also learning about other people as well
sure.
and how they show up, which just helps with our communication and allows us to see people, right? And have some empathy for other people's ways of being in the world. So it can be a fun game, both from like a self awareness
Okay.
perspective,
Well,
but
we
also,
should offline. We'll figure out what games we're gonna play with people.
yes,
Yeah.
I love,
Uh,
I love
well, I
it.
think we're about at time today. I'm trying not to say and I just did.
Practice.
Yeah. So, what else? Anything else we have going on? I believe we do.
Yes. So, a couple of things. The first thing is we have a poll that we are sharing on LinkedIn, specifically with a couple different topics. We have a mastermind that we're putting together, and also a couple workshops, free workshops that we'd like to put out there and we want them to be as useful as possible for folks. So, we will be sharing around a poll. Definitely take a look at it
And share with
and
people and yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Simple
So that's one
questions.
thing.
They'll take less than 5 seconds to answer.
Yep, super quick. And it'll help us better formulate the workshop so that we're giving really practical advice that people can walk away with and utilize, implement right away.
Yep.
And the other thing is, I want to share that tomorrow I'll be doing a TED Talk style speaking engagement for National Leadership Development Day. So
Very
if you
cool.
are a leader or if you have leaders in your world, and there's, I think, 5 speakers, and all of the topics are really exciting. I'll put the link in the chat, but if you go to www.nationalleadershipdevelopmentday.com, it's very long, you'll be able to see all the speakers and everything that's going on there. So tomorrow I'll be talking a little bit about coaching and bringing that in as a leadership tool, a leadership skill to be able to help your team reach their fullest potential. But there's a ton of topics. They're really short. So each person has 15 minutes and they're very, very practical. So they all have practical advice or tips that you can take away and implement right away. And I'll go ahead and put that in the chat for
Yeah,
us.
please. I'll check it out. I'll share.
And it's free. I don't know if I said that, but it's
Oh,
it's free, free event.
well, good. And as usual, if you want to learn more about either one of us, feel free to go to our websites. Mine's right there. Kiki's is right there. And any topics you'd like to hear us chit chat about that come to your mind about health and leadership, please let us know. We always answer our emails. We might take some time to get to them, but we answer them. So that is it for this Thursday, I think.
Yes. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. Take some time to decrease your stress, whatever works best for you, and tend to yourself, and so that you can show up as the best version of you.
Yeah.
All right. With that, thank you everyone for being here, for showing up. We'll see you hopefully
Yeah.
next week. I'll be tuning in from Alaska. We'll
Yay.
see you.
All right.
All right. Thank